What are we doing today?
What are we doing today? We haven't actually said frequently asked question in a while. What the FAQ video question of the day. I wonder actually how many people just think I'm cursing. So today's question is, isn't floating weird? It's just straight up like, hey, do you think floating, or don't you think floating is weird, or do you think floating is weird? Other people will come in and say, isn't floating weird, or what other things that they sometimes present? How does somebody present a question that's different than all the words I just said?
Like, why the hell would I want to try that?
Boom, that's a solid one. Early on, when we first opened up, is we had a group of 6 people come up, and they're all like giggly and excited to try it, but they're all kind of had that weird emphasis of like, I don't know what's happening, but we're all doing this together. But they came up with the assumption that we don't think this stuff is weird. And so they said, hey, we're kind of like nervous, this is super strange and weird, like we know it's probably gonna be a cool experience, but we just don't know. And I know that you probably don't think this is weird, but we do, and so we just want to let you know. But in many cases, my response to that is always like, you think this is weird, you guys get to come here and float once and then go on with the rest of your life and you have a cool story to talk about, where we legitimately are just surrounded. We created a business around this, we have a team around this. This is like our livelihood in so many ways. Like, we probably think it's more weird, like for somebody to come in and floating for the first time, we probably think the entirety of it is more strange than they do. It's kind of like bears. A lot of time, bears are more scared of us than we are of them. I'm not sure if that's true, but I know there's some things with animals that is the case.
I'd just like to point out that your story went from a group of giggly people to a singular lady.
Well, she was the leader of the pack. All the other people were just like giggly in the back, and then it was like the one lady kind of came up. She was just like, and she was the one who spoke for everyone.
That wasn't specified.
They were like one of those hydras.
They were one lady?
Yeah, they were like one lady, but they were like a hydra that had like a bunch of heads.
Oh, yeah, that chick. Okay.
Well,
all right, on to the next
That's not what happened, but that could have been what happened.
On to the next point.
Fine. Anyways, floating is super strange, and I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting because it's something that gets brought up so much, and it's one thing that it's not even that we don't hide behind. Like, we don't hide behind the fact that floating is strange. It's actually, I think, in many ways, it just makes so much sense. JP here, sometimes call him Filipos, helped me put some points together.
I put most of them together.
He put pretty much all of them together.
Yeah.
Why do people think floating is weird?
I can't remember. That was like 10 minutes ago.
That is true. That's a long time ago.
That's why you wrote the notes.
Probably the biggest one, which we did another video on, I think already, is you do it naked. We have 6 rooms here, so even though you have your own private room with that, with what are they called? Locks. There's also 5 other rooms, so 6 total, in which other people are doing the same thing as you, which is kind of strange. There's been some times where, like late at night, we had a like crazy packed day, and I'm getting ready to leave for the night and say goodbye to staff, and then I look down the hallway and I realize there's just 6 naked people floating quietly in a bunch of salt water in their own individual rooms.
What you're saying is you're imagining 6 naked people in the hallway. Oh.
No, maybe. I don't know.
I see.
In my deep subconscious, maybe. So there's that point, and then there's also, this is your point, and I like how you even worded it, is people are waiting for nothing to happen. But what did you say? Nothing is something in and of itself. That's a huge thing, is you're paying money to come to a place of business, to go into your own private room, to float naked in a bunch of salt water, to wait for nothing to happen.
And in turn, that nothing is something.
That nothing is something in and of itself. Another part is just the idea of just floating in water, generally for hours on end, is kind of strange. People worry like, well, if you float for an hour or more, and I mean, some people will float for 3, 4, 5 plus hours, but even that baseline starting point of an hour to 90 minutes, you're thinking like, aren't my fingers gonna be wrinkly? What do you do for an hour just laying around in a bunch of water? And the answer to that, since I brought it up, because the salt water is so dense, which is what lets you float, you also don't get wrinkly fingers. You can go in there for hours and your hands will look exactly like they do now. And here's another weird part. Here's another weird portion of this, is it's also strange that doing all of this genuinely makes you feel better and genuinely makes you feel good. To come in and float once and actually, you know, not cure anything, not fix all your problems, but simply give you a little bit of relief or time away so that you can help recover or, you know, de-stress and relax a little bit. There's no shortage of promises and quick fixes that can like help you and heal you and do all these different types of things. And so it's nice. I'm not saying floating is a quick fix. It's the furthest thing from it, but you can get a quick response for what continued floating can do. It actually makes you feel good, and it can make you feel good pretty quickly. The transition here from like, those are the reasons that people float, or those are the reasons why people who come to float might think it's weird or initially think it's the concept strange, because it is. Why do people float then? Or why is floating necessary in the context of like, why does floating have to be so weird? It's because the things that we do in our life that create stress and anxiety and pressures, especially things that we have control over. There's lots that can happen in life, obviously, that we have no control over. But think about all the other types of weird shit that we do in our life that actually create so many of these stresses and problems and pressures and anxieties in our life. Like, those are pretty strange as well. Where I was going with that is, yes, floating is strange, but it's very challenging to counteract something that's very strange without like an equal and opposite force or reaction. And so what I'm getting at with that is, other things that are weird that we do in our life besides floating are things like working excessive hours at a job that we just really don't love and arguably don't like. And there's so many of us that end up working 40, 60, 80 plus hours at something that's really not giving anything back to us. Trying to be friends with or impress people or hang out with people that we just don't like or don't treat us well, right? Like, we end up in toxic relationships, or we end up trying to do things and impress people and make money and do all these type of things when it doesn't actually make us happy. And then the other big one that I think is constantly around us at all times, and I mean, it's even next to us here, which is everything from media and technology and electronics, and we're constantly obsessively stuffing our face with this, way past the necessary practicality of effectiveness that these types of tools actually get us. Because I'm not saying things like social media and electronics are bad and don't give us any value. I just think we end up making these decisions that completely overshadow or drown us way past what's necessary to get the most out of them. If you just like very simply and concisely explain what you're doing that creates stress, the stuff that you have control over, quite often it's also super weird. The kind of emphasis of this video is floating is this nice little pocket of strange weirdness that helps cut down and kind of counteract all the stresses and pressures and anxieties that we sometimes create for ourselves by doing other weird shit that now just seems normal.
So how about this? I just think life in general is weird. So like, the fact that people think floating is weird makes sense because it's a part of life. But when you really think about life, it's pretty weird.
So you're saying like
I'm saying everything's weird.
You're saying like floating and working 100-hour work weeks and all the stuff are like raindrops underneath the umbrella of life. And the umbrella of life is actually just the really strange thing.
I'm saying the fact that we're even here in person talking to each other.
Yeah.
With our voices.
And not wearing pants.
And not wearing pants.
Just kidding, we're wearing pants.
You know, cells divided. And like, you divided. You used to be a little bundle of cells. So did I. So did everything here. Mm-hmm. So like, to me, when I think about stuff that's weird, I'm like, that's weird. This is just weird because people get naked doing it.
Sometimes we very easily forget about what you're talking about. We get so wrapped up in like, oh, what am I gonna wear to work today? It's like, we're these crazy multicellular devices, but individuals who even have the option to choose what's gonna look good or not on these skin sacks of bodies that we have that we run around the world in, right? And so being able to even go in a float tank and like peace out and just think about all the magnificent stuff of being a human being in general in this world and the chances of all that even happening is like mind-blowing.
I mean, what's so weird about coming to our business, getting naked, and spending an hour reconnecting with the singularity?
That's it. That's it. That's how we're gonna do every video now. So much of our initial perception of what is weird or strange also comes down to how we grew up and what our context of normal is. Like, what is our norm?
Yeah.
And
There's no similar normal for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, like when floating is not like a part of your normal, upbringing and thought process and something that you do to take care of yourself, like,
of course it's gonna be weird.
Of course it's gonna be strange, right? So.
That was a nice little summary there.
Yeah. Thank you for watching, everybody. If you had any other questions or even comments, I think this was like a cool video to kind of open up a lot of like general other follow-up questions or just people's own experiences with what we're talking about. So if you have any other questions or you want to throw some comments in there, we'd be happy to read them and respond. So until next time.
Oh, is that how you want to end it?
I don't know, until next time. See, unlike you, who has the same, actually amazing, I love it. JP has a script for story time. I pretend I have a script, AKA when I have notes here for the question of is floating weird, this is legitimately all that I have written on this slip of paper.